Welcome back into the Reier on YouTube channel, this time on a Saturday night following the Alabama Crimson Tide season opening 31-17 loss at the hands of the Florida State Seminoles, the 2-10 Florida State Seminoles from a year ago. Now, look, as we talked about in the lead up to this game, an entirely different team, in a lot of ways, tough to kind of get a feel for what exactly Alabama was going to go up against, although certainly a lot of history with Gus Malzahn. So not a lot in the way of surprises to Alabama fans anyway. Maybe to the Alabama coaching staff there was, although we knew there were some parallels between the Alabama defensive staff and Gus Malzahn. So there shouldn't have been there either, although there seemed to be at times. And also personnel-wise, there's a familiarity with Roydell Williams and Earl Little Jr. and Squirrel White. Some of these other guys that the Seminoles had brought in, Gunnar Hansen, an offensive tackle that started for the Seminoles on Saturday from Vanderbilt previously. So you knew some of the players involved, some of the actors involved. There was certainly a familiarity with that, but there were still a lot of questions about Alabama as a football team, especially with the way things unfolded in year one under Kalen DeBoer, with an emphasis on very disappointing performances on the road. Disappointing performances a year ago that saw Alabama as double-digit favorites find themselves in double-digit holes at Vanderbilt, at Oklahoma. And that was the case again in the season opener. After a very impressive start, going down the field, nearly 9 minutes with the football, get in the end zone, 7-0 Alabama. Hey, this is going to be different. This is a different football team. This is a different vibe about this football team, but nope. Seemed like as soon as adversity hit, showed up just a little bit in the form of a third down stop that went by the boards due to a defensive penalty, the toothpaste once again came flying out of the tube. And from that point forward, you're in that too familiar position from a year ago of, can this team respond? Can this coaching staff respond? Has this team been prepared to respond? All the talk we heard about maturity and all the positivity about all the returning experience, and it didn't seem to matter at all. Alabama goes down 17-7. 24-7 in the third quarter. And there was an answer there. Give Alabama some credit, but, kind of like last year when Alabama was a 4-loss team and had some opportunities in games like Vanderbilt, games like Oklahoma, to sort of reassert itself or assert itself in some instances, didn't get the job done. 24-17 game, you can say what you want about the flag, and it was soft, it was weak, it was all these things. It happened. And you know who those things happen to? They happen to 4-loss teams. 4-loss or more teams is who they happen to. And it happened again to Alabama on Saturday afternoon at Doak Campbell Stadium. You look at it statistically, Florida State, it was the perfect setup with Tommy Castellanos in there at quarterback. Attempted just 14 passes, but here's the thing. He attempted just 14 passes, but he still threw for $152 on those 14. So that's over 10 yards per pass attempt. That will work. That will work. We'll talk about some of the specifics of some of those completions too as we move throughout the program tonight, especially one over the top to Squirrel White against a true freshman corner, who, by the way, I'm pretty sure Kane Womack rotated in the entire first 3 units of the defense in the first 2 series. It felt that way. And it didn't go so well, I'd say. Ty Simpson, on the other hand, for Alabama in his first start, 23 of 43. If I told you before the game he was going to throw it 43 times, if I told Alabama fans that, it wouldn't have felt good about it. If I told you Tommy Castellanos was only going to throw it 14, you wouldn't have felt good about that either. Castellanos supplemented his 152 passing yards with 78 on the ground. Florida State with 230 rushing yards, and that's understanding Tim Keenan was out of there. But I could never get a feel for really the front in general. There were so many different guys in there throughout the game. James Smith, you expected to see a lot, but man, first series or two for Florida State, it was 2.5, 3 deep for Alabama. Not just up front, but at the defensive back positions. And Kane Womack's a believer in it. He feels like if he has starter caliber guys, he's going to rotate them in there. The problem is, once again on Saturday, I walked away not sure I saw 11 quality starters on the defensive side of the ball, let alone as many guys as we're rotating in and out of there. So if you want to jump in here live, by the way, we're open to that. Boy, the comments are ripping. Fago was in there a lot, Lance. You're right. I saw him in there early and often. Kind of wondered if I at one point I'm thinking, where's Steve, right? I mean, throw Steve in there too. Trent Wade not happy with that defense. Chiming in here. Womack has to go. Defense is soft. I don't think it's so much in terms of the mindset that he tries to instill in his guys. I'm sure they talk about being physical, but the way they align and kind of, again, the sort of mysterious substitution patterns, it doesn't seem to pave the way for a stout, formidable unit, a defense that you felt like was going to be more in the way of tackle for loss oriented, right? Remember hearing that? This is going to be a defense under Kane Womack that you're going to see tackles for loss. These poor defensive linemen for Nick Saban that were two-gapping, we're going to be aggressive. They're going to get up the field. They're going to be freed up to make plays. Alabama had 3 tackles for loss in this game against Florida State. And I know Gus can make it hard on you with the different things that he does to pile up tackles for loss. I get that. But take Gus out of the equation. Take his offense out of the equation. Alabama aligns in a way and employs a system that seems to lead to more catching of blocks and physicality. It's like we heard from Kalen DeBoer postgame. Kalen talked about played on our heels. I get when I watch Alabama defensively, that's all I ever think is that Alabama's playing on its heels. And I know some people, they'll talk about the 3 down linemen and things like that. And I get it. I get that offenses spread you out. Okay. And you're maybe not going to have, 4 guys or an edge walking up. But with Gus, if he runs motion at you or across the formation, you better be ready to set an edge. And too early and too often, once again in this game, Alabama, like was the case too often a year ago, soft on the edges. And I don't think it, again, is so much because guys like Xavier Brown and Damani Jackson and Deshaun Jones and these other guys, I don't think it's that they are soft. I just think that when you play off like Alabama does, you're going to be catching more, it just seems like. That's just me. That's just me. I thought in the second half, Alabama actually did a better job of it. There was a jet or a quick ball out to the field. And I think Keon Sabb ran the alley and came up and made a nice play. That felt like edge setting to an extent, but too much of the same old from last year. And that's why my thing in the lead up to this game, if you watch this channel, was that all this different going to be, we're mature, we return all this and that. And my thing has always been put it on tape. Put it on tape. And Alabama put on tape Saturday in Tallahassee a lot of what we saw a year ago. What was really all that different about it? That was the 119th ranked rushing offense in FBS last year in Florida State. And tonight, this afternoon in Tallahassee, they went for 230. And when they needed it, they were able to get it. So A lot of questions for this Alabama defense. It'll be interesting to see what kind of answers we get. We'll get into the offensive side of the ball as well. Obviously, the Ryan Williams injury, you hated to see later in the game. Kalen said post-game it is, in fact, a concussion for the second-year star. Interesting how Ryan Grubb went about utilizing some of the personnel and formations. I thought maybe the opening series presented a little bit of fool's gold to Alabama from a standpoint of it wasn't all that difficult between the tackles. That was a real positive to see Alabama come out and commit to the run game and go with three backs, really, in that first series. I thought Kevin Riley was a real positive in the game for Alabama at the running back position. He isn't the biggest guy in the world. He doesn't look like the most physical guy in the world. But I think he runs bigger than his physical attributes. I thought he ran bigger than Daniel Hill at 240 pounds. Now, I thought Daniel Hill at 240 pounds a time or two showed you some of the feet and things that you typically don't see from a guy his size. So that was good. But not having Jam Miller, that's not ideal either. But you felt good enough about your other guys to play three on the opening series of the game. So that tells me you didn't think there was a huge drop-off either in going from Jam to your next guys. Richard Young opened the game. Daniel Hill quickly in the game. Kevin Riley quickly in the game. We saw Dre Washington a little bit. I thought if the game got to the second half, that's where Dre Washington could be really effective if you had a chance to control the game. Alabama, obviously, after going up 7-0 and giving up 24 straight, wasn't in that position really in the second half, although they did get it back to 24-17. But, you got to stay on the field on third and fourth down too. Alabama did not turn the football over. That was another thing we heard in the preseason. We do a good job of taking care of the football. Well, if you're not converting thirds and fourths at a high rate, you better be hitting some explosive plays. And in the first half, that was not Alabama. I think Alabama had one play of more than 13 yards. Now, second half, it was better. Ty had completions of 30 to Jeremy Bernard, 37 to Jeremy Bernard. And by the way, give it up to Jeremy Bernard. He had 18 to Jeremy Bernard. These were all in the second half. These were all in the third quarter, as a matter of fact. Ty had a 27-yarder to tight end Josh Cuevas. So that did improve in the second half, but first half, it really didn't happen. Alabama absolutely controlled the first quarter. 22 offensive plays for Alabama, 4 of 5 on third and fourth down plays. So Kalen talked after the game about the start not being what he wanted, or not starting fast enough. I thought the start was exactly what Alabama could have wanted. But again, it just feels like this team, it's still so early. And look, maybe things can change, but it just feels like that front runner-itis from last year, right? As long as you blow out early against an LSU, you can win on the road in Baton Rouge, like Alabama did a year ago. But boy, if you find yourself in some kind of hole, it's going to be exceedingly difficult. So offensively for Alabama, FSU had to be thrilled with the fact that before his injury, Ryan Williams, 5 catches for 30 yards, 5 touches for 30 yards, I think it was. Yeah. And your Florida State can absolutely live with that. Now, Jeremy went 8 for 146. And what I like about Jeremy too is he's always there for the smoke, not just in terms of after the catch and finishing plays in which he has the ball in his hands. But you saw some good stuff, I think, on the long catch by Cuevas in the quick game. Jeremy had a really nice block. I think Rico Scott did as well. So those were some of the positives. But again, team can't get right is what this has been for 14 games of the Kalen DeBoer era. And I know a lot of people out there, it's time, $70 million buyout, which I get it. But besides all that, we're not there. We're not there with Kalen DeBoer. I think you certainly can ask a lot of serious and tough questions at this point. And look, the hope is that Florida State really is a good football team. I'm not convinced. But, they're obviously better than Alabama on Saturday when you look at it in terms of how you win football games, and you still win it in large part up front and explosive plays. And even though Florida State threw it just 14 times again in the game, had some big ones, man. 64 to Jalen Lucas. That was really a backbreaker. You had a bust there on that one. And then, as we talked about earlier, Squirrel White with the 40-yarder. You just put Dejoun Lee, the true freshman, in there at corner. And Dejoun Lee's going to be a good player. But it's like Gus had that one in his back pocket, especially coming out of a timeout. That was out of a timeout. You got time to see, what your personnel is going to be, who's going to be on the field. And you get a 6'3", 6'4" true freshman corner against a speedster in Squirrel White. And, Squirrel White wins that one easily. Dejoun Lee's still going to be a really, really good player. But that's a tough matchup for him in week 1 in his first game at this level of college football. What else you got for me, guys and gals? Lance, checking back in here. Talk me down, Travis. Fire Kane. He will filibuster his way through questions. Like I just said, obviously you're not there. You're not there. But I've always said about coaches, especially at places like Alabama, everyone always talks about the games like Tennessee on the schedule, the games like Auburn on the schedule, LSU. You mix in Georgia, like you still have to go on the road to here in a couple of 3 weeks, and equate those matchups to shelf life for a coach at a place like Alabama. I'll go on record. If you go 500 in those kind of games, you'll be okay. It's games like Vandy, Oklahoma, and this one against Florida State that prove problematic in terms of big picture shelf life. And again, not there yet. You're not there yet with Kalen DeBoer. Trent Wade, DeBoer has 4 losses now in 14 games as a 13.5-point favorite. Yeah, as we talked about earlier, that 13.5-point favorite line or double-digit favorite has often resulted in being down double digits on the road. Gosh, Lance says Alabama's in the midst of a losing streak. Yeah, that's a couple in a row. And you lost to a Michigan team in the bowl game that didn't even have a quarterback. So, yeah, I understand the frustration. Philip Thomas chiming in here says, Womack said they were working on tackling all offseason. That was pretty disappointing because it wasn't – you couldn't blame it on inexperience. I mean, you had some old dudes out there that couldn't make plays. I called it A-day tackling is what I referred to it as. Thought it got a little better in the second half. I thought Yanzi Pierre showed some good things when he was in the game. In the second half, you did have an LT Overton sighting. James Smith, periodically. I thought Deontay, Gus had a plan for Deontay. I think it was maybe the Castellanos touchdown in the first half where you got the block. It was borderline on Bray Hubbard, too, on the corner. The hands were outside pretty good on Bray. Probably could have called a hold there if you wanted to. They didn't. And then, that matchup, you're counting on getting enough of that guy and then see if Deontay can get over the top. But, again, where's the downhill force in this defense? Where are the negative plays? I watch defenses like LSU playing right now against Clemson. You might light Blake Baker up, but he's gonna bring people downhill on you, and he's gonna challenge you. Eyes to the quarterback, soft coverages, soft linebackers. That's the thing I still don't get. I still don't understand. I don't understand what the hell the Wolf is doing in this defense half the time. I'll look up and see the Wolf playing 6 yards off the ball with no edge being set. I still don't understand it. Gelato chiming in. Yeah, Bama couldn't stop a reverse to save their life. Kind of knew that was coming later too. Just anything to the perimeter. Until Alabama shows otherwise against anything to the perimeter, it's going to be a problem. Now, you did see the shovel pass attempt at least, right? In the second half get stopped in the fourth quarter, I think. Philip Thomas back in. Rico Scott played with heart today. Yeah, I thought Rico Scott was fine. This is going to go back to Ty. And we heard from Kalen in the post game that, he's got to continue to work through the progressions and maybe be a little more patient. I thought Ty at times was a little antsy with his feet. Hard to be overly critical because it was his first start. And he did actually use his legs at times to keep drives alive. But, again, if Ty is a dual quarterback, I know he's been referred to as a dual threat, but in my opinion, he is a dual quarterback in that he can throw it pretty well and he can run with it pretty well, but he's not a dual threat to me. When you talk about dual threat, you're talking about guys that are legitimate threats, both throwing it and running it. And maybe Ty will become more of that. I mean, we're just a start in, and certainly everybody else around him's got to be better. I thought Wilkin Formby, you didn't hear about Wilkin Formby pretty much all night, did you? Or all afternoon, which tells me he was probably better. He was better. I mean, you had Caden Proctor getting beat on a one-on-one in the third quarter. It wasn't even close. And that's another thing I harped on all offseason. Caden Proctor had to have a really good offseason. And then we get to SEC media days and we hear he's added weight. Just tells people I put on weight. But I'm going to lose about 20 in the next month. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. That's I think about as excited as Alabama fans maybe got all afternoon when Parker picked that thing up and started getting it done after the scoop. Parker Brailsford, yeah, that was some captainship right there on that play. And look, it's funny because it's almost true. But in terms of running the football, Alabama with just 87 rushing yards. Again, you got behind by 17, so you were going to have to throw it more. You were going to go with more tempo. But I would have liked more variety in the run game. The inside zone was effective. A couple of different stretches in the game. The opening drive, it was. Second half, it had its moments, especially with Riley. Other than Kevin Riley, you didn't have anyone average more than 3 yards per carry. Kevin went for 6.2. Had a little Glenn Coffey to him, I thought. He kind of seems like he has a feel for it, even though he doesn't look like that kind of back. Seems to have a feel for it. And, but just a long run of 13 yards for Alabama in the game. So not much in the way of explosive plays. 14 targets for Jeremy Bernard in the game. Now, look, a lot of that is going to have to do with Ryan Williams being the attraction magnet that he is. But that was a strong performance. Isaiah Horton, 1 catch, 6 yards. It felt like Rico Scott was more a part of the game coming off the bench than Isaiah Horton was in the game. And again, you just hope for Ryan Williams. He's okay, and you're not worried so much about the next couple weeks with him. But Bernard, 14 targets, caught 8 balls, 146, 37 for a long. What else do we got here in the comments? Boy, y'all are rough on Kane. I mean, I get it. I don't see it. I haven't seen it yet either. Even with some of the numbers people tried to throw at me a year ago. Tide fan 88 says, I couldn't watch after the first half. It was too frustrating. The tackling was awful. Love my Tide, but it was so bad. Yeah, I mean, you were having PTS after last season. You, Tide fan, you had seen this. You saw this last year. Yeah, Philip, there was 1 sack. And I understand, again, Florida State only threw the football 14 times. Now, in terms of attempts or plays that were called to throw the football, it was more than that. And Castellanos had some extended plays that hurt. Lance chiming in, linebackers were awful. Jefferson wasn't even trying. I don't know if it was that I don't think it was that he wasn't trying, but yeah, there was one particular play there, I want to say in the fourth quarter, where it was so bad. I did say to myself at that point, I don't know who. I mean, I know you got Nakai Hill-Green and that situation, but you might start having to dial up, at some point here in the not too distant future, some more of those linebackers. Philip, that's the play, I think. Yeah, Justin Jefferson looked like he was in good shape against Castellanos, and Castellanos just kind of got it done without much of an effort there. Jim McEwen, DeBoer never should have made compromises. Saban's OL, DL, and strength coaches looked like the problem today. I didn't think that I went into the game thinking the OL wouldn't be what, I mean, we had PFF and some of these people telling us that number 1 offensive line in the country. And that's one of those instances where my response was put it on tape. Well, didn't put it on tape today. Obviously didn't have Jaden Roberts. I thought Vandemark was okay. Formby seemed fine. Brailsford, maybe more issues on that left side. Although some of those zone runs that you hit were kind of in there between, it seemed like, Brailsford and Cam Dewberry. At this point, though, anyone that views Caden Proctor as a top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL draft, yeah, going to have a tough time selling that, I think, amongst the Alabama fan base. Philip Thomas, linebackers didn't get addressed all offseason. We had to settle for a hurt Deontay Lawson. But, that's the thing. Like, here's the problem for Kalen moving. One of the problems. There's multiple problems. One of the problems for Kalen is that anything he says Monday or beyond, even for at least a while, is going to be viewed with great suspicion. Because what did we hear? Not just from Kalen either. Kane too. It's just amazing what Deontay's done. He's back. There's no limitations. And he was out there like there was no limitations. I mean, he was in that spot. He was the guy at the mic. That wasn't a series by series thing or a situational thing. And God bless him for getting back to at least the point he's gotten back to. But after the performance, more so of that entire unit on Saturday, it's one of those things where I think a lot of Alabama fans tonight feel like either they were lied to or maybe this staff has a serious evaluation problem in terms of their own people. Yeah. Something that showed up to me too, Lance, in the game, and I talked about it, and I know Deontay, and I'm okay with the linebackers streamlining, but I agree. Lawson and Jefferson, to the eye anyway. And this is a different era of football. You're not going to play with Rolando McClain as much in 2025. Now, look, am I saying this defense wouldn't take 2009 or even 2007 Rolando McClain at this point? Absolutely, they would. But more so in terms of the size and what's important now, more important now at that position. You're just not going to find too many 240 guys. Let's see here. David Davenport checking in. It's not just Malzahn. Alabama has never figured out how to stop an RPO quarterback. Yeah, I mean, RPO, zone read, those type of things. And typically all those offenses incorporate perimeter game. And that's what sticks in my craw as much as anything else, probably with this Alabama defense, is that, boy, under Nick Saban, the one thing you could count on an Alabama defense to do is set an edge. And it's amazing to me still how late Alabama defenders on the perimeter are getting to the football in too many instances. You got some Florida State fans in here now beating on their chest about how Alabama didn't lose to Vandy. This is Florida State. Look, pal, I didn't see Jamal Reynolds out there, okay? Now, I didn't see Marvin Jones out there. I didn't see Prime. I didn't see T-Buck. Congratulations on the win. And as I said earlier, I really do hope for Florida State's sake that this win means as much as Florida State people think. And now, look, when you're coming off at 2-10, you could have beat Charleston Southern tonight, and you'd have been halfway to last year. So there would have been some enjoyment at least from that. But this is more about Alabama looking like Alabama looked than Florida State making a statement about being back. I kind of wait and see, because unfortunately, I'm not sure what this Alabama team is going to look like by the time we get to the middle of October. And the people are there still. The personnel is still there. To think about the college football playoff at this point, though, playoff? I had to go Jim Mora on that. No, it's impossible to kind of envision that with already a loss to Florida State. Florida State might end up 7-5 for all you know. And, you could go, this is way ahead of yourself here. You could go 9-2 the rest of the way, and you'd be right back in that 9-3 from a year ago. And if Florida State ends up being a 7-5 or something like that, you're out. I agree, Trent. I thought Jeremy was really good. Lance liked Kevin Riley. Yeah, I think he warranted more snaps as the game moved on, and probably maybe even into next week. I just would like to see more variety from the run. You got some outside zone, and I think there are times where maybe they wanted to run outside zone, but it was part of RPO. There was one time in particular, it looked like they had the outside zone set up into the boundary maybe. And it looked like Ty pulled it. Now, I don't know what's predetermined or not in this offense. I do think one thing I came away from this game thinking about Ty is that Ryan Grubb, what we heard from him in the preseason, was largely true, in that they had a lot of trust in Ty in this game in terms of checks even. Because, yeah, you got the in helmet, communication, but that goes off at 15 seconds. And you were seeing Ty, I thought, too many times. You had Ty, up in there making checks with 7 or 8 on the play clock. And, but I do believe that. I do believe this about Ty Simpson after week 1. I do believe he has the absolute want to get the job done. I do believe going into this game, he had the absolute trust of his coaching staff. What will be interesting moving forward is how does Ryan Grubb, Kalen DeBoer, this staff respond to how he responded to the start as you look ahead to winnable games coming up here in the next few weeks. Yeah, they tried some screen stuff, but it just didn't seem to develop. The thing about Ty too was and these are things again from one game. I get it. I understand it. I thought he was a pat late at times, getting the ball out. And that leads me to think he's not as much of an anticipatory passer. Doesn't mean he still can't be effective, but he does, at least in week 1. Maybe as he gets more comfortable, that will come to light more, that he has more of that ability. Just felt like on a few occasions Saturday, he needed to see it open instead of throw it open. What else do we got here? Still Bill chiming in. Alabama was once LB University, wide receiver university. Oh, no, Bill, we can't do that. We can't do that. Yeah, the trolls are coming. Bill's upset. Wow. Sully says the YouTube notifications failed me again. This was kind of late in getting up, Sully. So that's more me. Triple A chiming in. LSU is a really good football team. They've at least been representable tonight, right? On the road in a tough spot against a legitimate football team in Clemson. 10-10 right now. Probably should be up. They've had some failures, especially into the first half. I didn't get the time management, the 4th down go there with only 12 seconds left in the half. By the way, Aaron Anderson, former Alabama player, with a nice grab here from Garrett Nussmeier. But Sully's keeping receipts here too. He says the quote, the disrespect will be addressed, end quote. Narrator, the disrespect was not addressed. No, Tommy Castellanos talked his ish. Wow. What about Connor Talty? I thought he was one of the, if not the biggest question mark for Alabama going into this game. And I know he missed a 53-yarder early, but it wasn't a bad strike. It didn't look like he kind of popped it up a little bit, like, you get under your driver and you, in just a little bit, it's not like it goes straight up and only 10 yards, but it goes about, if you hit your driver 220, and I know a lot of you folks, you'll tell me you hit it 378, but if you hit your driver 220 and you pop it up a little bit and it goes 170-ish, that's kind of what that kick was, the miss from 53. But it was dead between the pipes. And then he comes back and he drills the 40-yarder there in the third quarter. So really, in terms of the kicks he's got to make, he was 1 for 1. Yes, you would have loved the 53-yarder to go through, but first attempt, really, from that kind of distance, that's asking a little bit. I thought also when you talk about the punting game, that wasn't really a problem. You actually got the big takeaway off the punting game. Blake Dowd, 3 punts, 144 yards, 48-yard average. That's not a drop off from James Burnip, that's for sure. And again, you had the takeaway you needed, right? To kind of get you back in the game, but you're just not able to capitalize. And so when Florida State kind of had its 2024 moment, it didn't seem to hurt the Seminoles as much, you know. You cut it to a 24-17 game, and then you proceed to give it right back up. Right back up. Let's see, what do we have here? Trying to kind of look back on this. Yeah. Saw some different guys, too, on punt return, too, right? Saw Bach back there in the second half. I think Ryan Williams was back there. Defensively, though, it was you absolutely needed a program with all that rotation. Let's see. Nick ain't coming back, guys. Let's see. Yeah, again, you know, some of the same things we heard about the offensive line, we heard about the defensive line back in the offseason and going into the preseason. Going to be much improved. And I understand, again, Tim Keenan out. I get it. But LT Overton wasn't hurt. You know, James Smith wasn't hurt. Gelato chiming in here about Quay Rusal. He did play today. Quay did play. As I said earlier, I do think when you talk about that position, there were some positive things from Yanze Pierre. It's been a while in coming for the now veteran linebacker, but he had 4 solo tackles, 1 for loss, one of Alabama's 3 for loss. Alabama's lone sack of the game came from a DB in Keon Satt. Deontay Lawson with 6 tackles, 4 solos. Justin Jefferson, 6, 4 solos. Bray Hubbard, 5, 4 solos and a quarterback hurry. Florida State, on the other hand, 7 tackles for loss and 3 sacks of Ty Simpson. And some of that was protection related. We talked about Proctor giving up the blow by there in the second half. I think some of it, again, Ty isn't going to be probably the pocket savvy guy that we've seen from some other Alabama quarterbacks in the past, but a lot of room for improvement for everybody where Ryan Grubb's unit is concerned. Where was Cole Adams? Saw him, Lance. I saw him. But, yeah, in terms of the wide receiver rotation, not so much. Saw him on special teams. Saw Jalen Hale in there as a part of that rotation. Latsier Brooks. We saw Derek Meadows out there. But, yeah, it didn't seem like a high usage day for Cole Adams. Yeah, Trent's asking about the 3rd and 7, and Ty didn't run with it there. I mean, is that the same play that Ryan was wide ass open and he kind of dirtballed it out there? You know, like I said earlier, I think Ty is a dual quarterback. I'm not ready to say Ty's really a dual threat. He'll be a dual threat next week against La Monroe. But will he be a dual threat against Georgia? Was he Saturday? No. Let's see. Formby got 8 up. I didn't really. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Jeremy Freeman chiming in. The issue is preparation. No juice, no heart. Starts with the staff. I mean, you pretty much have to put this at the feet of the staff because, as I said earlier, it sounds like almost they were fooled by this. Like year two, going into year two, and it sounds like they didn't really see this coming. It isn't the messaging. It wasn't the messaging anyway. And I understand, you're going to try to keep it as positive as possible. But, Nick Saban had no problem tough loving his team through the media when he'd come off the practice field on Wednesday nights too. It wasn't hard to tell with Nick Saban whether it had been a good week leading up to that Wednesday press availability or a not so good week. Now, I'm sure he got fooled too. Still 18 to, well, it's really like what, 18 to 42-year-olds now? It used to be 18 to 22-year-olds. But with COVID, it seems like we got guys that are, they live at Moose Haven and then, spend Saturdays with college football teams. I didn't like the Sully. I thought, again, when the adversity hit, even when the game was still reasonable, before it got to 24-7, I didn't like the vibe or the look of that team. Yeah, and that is important, Shannon. That's something, that's obviously been talked about a lot, was that Ty didn't turn the ball over. Yeah, that's true. But if you're gonna go for as many force and your third down conversions aren't great and your explosives, although again, the second half that took a nice move upward. So there's hopefully going to be a continuation of that. But there are also some plays where if you're going to go on 4th and 5, you got to push the ball a little bit too. It's great that you took care of the ball, but if you throw it to a back in the flat, who's not really who you're wanting to go to there, and you come up short, you kind of did both. You took care of the ball and you still turned it over. People still talking about transition, and we're 14 games into this. No, last year was the transition talk. No more transition talk. AAA, somebody said better to lose now than late based on the way they played today. They are going to lose early, in between, and late. Didn't put that tape will not put a lot of fear into upcoming opponents. And the thing is, like with Georgia down the road, it's been such a rough series for Georgia, even under Kirby Smart. You're not going to sneak up on Georgia, even if you're not playing good football by the time you go to Athens. Florida Phil says Ohio State wanted their coach fired after game 1 last year. Well, how about that perspective? Seth Hill already having concerns about the Jackson Arnold game happening again, this time on the Plains. But look, season started with Gus, you ended on the Plains with Auburn. You're already thinking ahead. Oh. All right. Anything else before we get out of here? I'm glad to jump on though and hear you guys and gals out. It's a rough one. 0-1. Not used to that, right? To start a season. That's not the Alabama football that a lot of people have even grown up with at this point. You got people at 20 years old that don't understand that. 30 years old, maybe. Oh, gosh. But still 11 games to go, guys. So hang in there with us right here at Reier on YouTube. Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News is going to join me here in the next night or so with Talking Tide. We'll talk a little bit more about it, the aftermath, and go in depth on Alabama football right here on Reier on YouTube. It's the Reier on YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel as of yet, please hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. That way you'll be alerted to our content as it drops here on the channel. And if you could hit us with a thumbs up, we would greatly appreciate it as well. Try to make the most of the rest of this holiday weekend. It's going to be all right. I promise. I promise it's going to be all right. We're going to be right here for you, right here on Reier on YouTube. Until next time, so long, everybody.